The desert night was silent, until a single gunshot echoed through the canyons, carried by the whispering wind, like a ghostly scream. Luke staggered forward, clutching his bleeding side, his breath ragged and shallow as he stumbled through the darkness. The sand beneath his boots turned dark with his blood, and every step felt heavier than the last. Far behind, Marshal Crane's men searched with lanterns, their shouts cutting through the night. Luke gritted his teeth, muttering, "Not tonight, Crane, not tonight." A shadowy figure emerged from the rocks, the mentor known as Elias, watching with wary eyes before disappearing again. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the town lay sleeping, unaware of the violence creeping closer. Lightning flashed on the horizon, revealing the outline of a lone rider watching from a distant bluff. Luke collapsed to one knee, whispering his sister's name before darkness threatened to take him. Luke awoke in a cave lit by a dim fire, his wounds roughly bandaged, the smell of smoke and damp earth filling his senses. Elias sat nearby, sharpening a knife, his expression unreadable as he studied the injured man. Luke groaned and tried to rise, but Elias pressed a firm hand on his chest and said, "You'll tear yourself apart if you move." Luke growled, "Crane's men won't stop till they find me." Elias leaned closer, his voice low. "You got enemies in every shadow, boy. You need to heal before you face them." Outside, the wind whistled through narrow rocks, carrying faint echoes of search parties calling Luke's name. Luke's jaw tightened as he swore silently to settle this fight before the dawn broke again. As dawn broke, Elias led Luke to the cave's mouth, pointing toward the distant town shrouded in morning mist. "That place ain't safe," Elias said, his voice heavy with experience. Luke scanned the horizon, fists clenched, and muttered, "It was once my home." Elias shook his head slowly. "Home's where the bullets don't find you." Luke turned, anger flashing in his eyes. "Crane took everything from me, Elias. My sister, my land, my name." Elias sighed and adjusted the strap on his rifle. "Then, you better be ready to bleed for what you want back." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the town, signaling trouble already brewing. In the heart of the town, Marshal Crane strolled down the main street, flanked by deputies, his boots striking the wooden planks with authority. Townsfolk watched silently from windows, fear etched on their faces. Crane stopped in front of the saloon and addressed the crowd with false warmth. "Luke has turned against the law," he declared. "Anyone hiding him will share his fate." A woman gasped softly, clutching her child close. Crane's cold smile widened as he tipped his hat, then turned to his men. "Search every house," he ordered. Inside the saloon, the bartender froze mid-pour, dread settling heavy as thunder, rumbled faintly in the distance. Behind the saloon, a shadow moved gracefully among stacked barrels. It was Isabella, known for her sharp tongue and sharper secrets. She slipped through the alley and paused, watching Crane's men sweep the street. Her dark eyes narrowed as she whispered, "Luke, you fool, you should have run farther." When no one was looking, Isabella darted into the stable where a hidden passage lay beneath the straw. She uncovered a folded note addressed to Luke and tucked it into her bodice. Adjusting her elegant yet worn shawl, she stepped back into the light, her face carefully neutral as she prepared to deliver her warning. As dawn painted the canyon walls gold, Luke sat by the dying fire while Elias tightened the straps on his weathered rifle. The older man's voice was steady, but his eyes were shadowed by old regrets. "You run from ghosts, Luke, but they run faster," Elias said, his tone carrying the weight of years. Luke stared at the flames, jaw clenched. "Crane burned my home and buried my sister. I'm done running." Elias tossed a small flask at him. "Drink and listen, boy. Vengeance ain't the same as justice." Luke swallowed hard, firelight flickering across his scarred face. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon like a warning, carrying the scent of smoke from the distant town. Luke finally whispered, "Then teach me to fight smart." Elias nodded grimly. "You'll fight smart or you'll die." Down in the town's outskirts, Sam waited nervously by the corral, gripping the handle of an old revolver. His clothes were patched but clean, and his wide eyes held more hope than fear. When Luke appeared, Sam's face lit up. "Luke, you made it!" he shouted, rushing forward. Luke stopped him with a raised hand, scanning the area for Crane's men. "Quiet, Sam," Luke hissed. "You shouldn't be here." Sam's voice cracked with emotion. "I want to help. I can fight beside you." Elias stepped from the shadows, shaking his head. "This ain't a boy's fight," he said firmly. Sam squared his shoulders defiantly. "I'm not a boy anymore." Luke sighed deeply, knowing the dangers ahead, and muttered, "This road only ends in blood." Luke and Elias moved deeper into the corral's shade, leaving Sam standing stubbornly near the gate. "He'll get himself killed," Elias growled, voice low with frustration. Luke's eyes softened as he watched Sam. "He's got fire, Elias, like I once did." Elias crossed his arms. "Fire burns quickest when it's young." Sam overheard them, his fists clenching at their dismissal. "You don't know what I've lost," Sam shouted, his voice breaking. The outburst echoed through the empty yard. Luke turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "Quiet, Sam. Crane's men will hear." Sam bit his lip and glared, his youthful pride wounded. The wind swept dust through the yard, a silent reminder of the danger pressing in from all sides. Inside Crane's office, rich wood and polished brass gleamed under lamplight, a stark contrast to the dusty streets outside. Crane stood at the window watching his deputies ride out. Across from him, Sheriff Briggs adjusted his badge nervously. "You think Luke's hiding nearby?" Briggs asked, voice wavering. Crane smiled coldly. "Luke won't leave this territory alive." Briggs hesitated, his conscience flickering. "The townsfolk are scared. They think you're pushing too hard." Crane turned sharply, slamming a hand on the desk. "Fear keeps them obedient." Outside, a storm gathered, thunder rumbling like distant drums. Crane's eyes glimmered with ambition as he said, "By the time this is done, the land will be mine." Luke crouched behind a crumbling wall on the edge of town, watching Crane's men terrorize a small homestead. Smoke rose from a burned wagon, and a woman clutched her child while pleading for mercy. Sam knelt beside Luke, his breath ragged, whispering, "We have to help them." Luke's jaw tightened, every muscle in his body screaming for action. Elias grabbed Luke's arm. "Not yet. A bad move here gets us all killed." Luke glared at him, teeth gritted. "So we just watch?" The woman's cries grew louder, mixing with the howls of the rising wind. Luke finally closed his eyes, his heart heavy with rage and helplessness, as Crane's men laughed and rode away into the storm. Night fell heavy over the outskirts of town as Luke and Sam crept toward a barn where villagers were held captive. Elias crouched behind them, scanning the shadows with sharp eyes. Luke whispered, "Stay close and stay quiet." Sam's breath trembled as he nodded, clutching his revolver tightly. Inside, the muffled sobs of frightened townsfolk echoed against the wooden walls. Luke kicked the door open, gun raised, but chaos erupted instantly. Crane's men were waiting, rifles already leveled. Bullets tore through the dark, screams mixing with gunfire. Sam stumbled backward, ears ringing. Luke dove behind a trough, shouting, "Get them out, Sam!" In the confusion, 2 villagers fell lifeless. Elias fired steadily, his face a mask of grim fury as smoke filled the barn like a choking fog. The survivors fled into the night, but Sam stood frozen by the sight of 2 villagers lying still in the dirt. Luke grabbed him by the shoulders and shook hard. "Sam, we can't stay here." Sam's voice cracked as he shouted, "They're dead because of me." Elias stepped between them, his tone cutting like a blade. "They're dead because Crane set a trap." Sam jerked free, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I could help, but I made it worse." Luke's chest heaved as he fought his own guilt. "We save who we can," Luke said fiercely, "or we all burn with this town." In the distance, a wolf howled under the cold starlight, a haunting reminder of the wilderness closing in around them. The next morning, Crane stood in the town square, his polished boots gleaming as he addressed a crowd gathered under a rising sun. "Luke is a danger to this town," Crane declared, voice booming with false righteousness. The crowd murmured uneasily, exchanging fearful glances. Crane gestured dramatically toward the burned barn. "He brought ruin to your families, and more will come if he isn't stopped." A man in the crowd shouted, "Luke saved us once." Crane's cold smile didn't falter. "And now he'll destroy you." Sheriff Briggs shifted uncomfortably beside him, but said nothing. Crane raised his badge high. "By my authority, Luke is hereby an outlaw to be hunted." The crowd gasped as deputies rode off to spread the word. Inside the dim back room of the saloon, Isabella sat across from Luke, her fingers tracing the rim of a glass. "I have information you need," she said softly, her voice laced with tension. Luke's eyes narrowed. "And what's your price?" Isabella leaned forward, her elegant shawl slipping slightly. "Safe passage out of here. For me." Luke's jaw tightened. "Why should I trust you?" Isabella's expression faltered for a moment, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. "Because if you don't, Crane wins." Sam shifted uneasily near the door, his young face full of doubt. Elias stood in the shadows, silent but watchful. The room was thick with the smell of whiskey and smoke as fragile alliances formed in the darkness. As they left the saloon, Elias gripped Luke's arm tightly, forcing him to stop beneath the wooden awning. "That woman's trouble," Elias warned, his voice rough. Luke glared at him. "We don't have the luxury to turn away help." Elias's eyes were hard. "Help comes with chains." Sam shifted nervously between them, looking from one man to the other. "Maybe she just wants to live," Sam said quietly. Elias turned on him sharply. "Or maybe she's leading us to our graves." Thunder rumbled in the distance as the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of galloping horses. Luke's hand moved instinctively to his revolver. "We'll know soon enough," he said, eyes scanning the horizon for approaching danger. The night was thick with mist as Luke, Elias, Sam, and Isabella crept toward an abandoned mill where they planned to strike Crane's supply lines. Luke whispered orders, his breath visible in the cold air. "We move fast, take the weapons, and disappear." Sam's grip on his revolver tightened nervously. Isabella adjusted her shawl, her eyes darting toward the shadows. Elias's jaw was set in grim determination. They slipped inside, but the air felt wrong, too still. A lantern flickered suddenly, revealing rifles aimed from the rafters above. "It's a trap," Elias shouted. Gunfire erupted in a deafening roar. Luke dove for cover as Sam screamed in terror. Isabella froze, caught between fight and flight. Crane's men descended with cruel laughter, their ambush perfectly laid. In Crane's office, storm clouds rumbled outside as Sheriff Briggs paced nervously. "Marshal, the people are restless," Briggs said, wringing his hands. Crane leaned back in his chair, a sinister smile curling his lips. "Let them be restless. Fear is a leash." Briggs swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "Luke's not the enemy they think he is. If the truth comes out..." Crane slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the oil lamp. "The truth is what I say it is." Lightning illuminated his cold eyes as he leaned forward. "Luke is a tool, and when I'm done, he'll be the reason this land is mine." Briggs flinched but stayed silent, torn between duty and survival. Outside, rain began to lash the window pane. Back at the cave, Sam sat apart from the others, staring blankly at his trembling hands. Luke approached quietly, kneeling beside him. "You fought bravely," Luke said, though his tone was heavy with doubt. Sam shook his head violently. "I froze when it mattered. People died because of me." Elias watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Isabella paced nervously, glancing toward the storm clouds gathering outside. "Crane has more men coming," she warned. Sam's voice cracked as he whispered, "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." Luke gripped Sam's shoulders firmly. "This fight will chew us all up, Sam. What matters is we keep standing. Sam's tear-filled eyes met Luke's, his idealism cracking under the weight of reality. As the storm raged outside, Luke confronted Isabella near the cave's entrance, his face etched with fury. "You led us into that trap," he snarled. Isabella's eyes widened with hurt. "I didn't know, Luke, Crane. He has something on me." Elias stepped forward, his voice harsh. "What did you trade for our lives, girl?" Isabella's hands trembled as she clutched her shawl. "My brother," she whispered. "Crane's holding him. I had no choice." Sam gasped softly, his anger melting into pity. Luke's breathing slowed as he studied her tear-streaked face. "If you lie to me again, I'll leave you for Crane," Luke said coldly. Isabella nodded through her tears, a broken promise in her eyes as thunder shook the cave walls. The following morning, thick fog blanketed the town, as Crane's men dragged Elias into the square, his hands bound tightly. Crane stood tall on the platform, addressing the frightened townsfolk. "Here stands a traitor aiding an outlaw," he proclaimed. Elias's eyes burned with defiance as he spat at Crane's boots. Luke, hidden on a nearby rooftop, watched with clenched fists, his mind racing. Isabella stood beside him whispering, "It's a trap, Luke. They want you to come for him." Sam crouched low, his breathing ragged. "We can't just leave him," he hissed. Luke's gaze never wavered from Elias. "No," he growled, "but we'll play by our rules, not theirs." The crowd murmured fearfully as Crane raised his revolver skyward. Night cloaked the town in heavy darkness as Luke crouched near a crumbling stone wall, his breath misting in the cold air. Beside him Sam trembled, but held his revolver tightly, determination etched across his face. Elias's capture had left them raw with desperation. Isabella pointed toward Crane's stronghold, her voice low and urgent. "There's a hidden passage beneath the stables." Luke nodded, his jaw clenched. "We get Elias out, burn their supplies and vanish before sunrise." They moved like shadows through the fog, slipping past guards unaware of their approach. A guard's boot scraped on wood, and Luke froze, hand hovering over his revolver. Sam swallowed hard, sweat beading on his brow. The storm above masked their movements as they entered the enemy's den. Inside the stable's hidden tunnel, flickering torchlight cast eerie shadows on damp walls. Footsteps echoed behind them as Crane's men gave chase. Isabella grabbed Luke's arm, gasping, "Go, I'll hold them off." Luke's eyes widened with fury. "No, we stay together." Isabella shook her head, her lips trembling. "Crane will kill us all if you don't escape." Sam hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear. Isabella smiled sadly, tears glistening. "Luke, tell my brother I tried." Before Luke could stop her, she turned and fired into the darkness, drawing the men toward her. Gunshots erupted as Luke dragged Sam forward, rage and grief tearing at his chest. The tunnel trembled with the violence left behind. Luke and Sam burst into a storage room filled with crates of stolen weapons and food. Elias sat bound to a post, blood on his temple, but defiance blazing in his eyes. "You're late," Elias growled through gritted teeth. Luke knelt quickly, cutting the ropes. Before Elias could stand, a slow clap echoed in the room. Marshal Crane stepped from the shadows, his polished boots gleaming. Touching reunion, Crane sneered. "Tell him, Luke. Tell him who you really are." Luke froze as Crane's smile widened. "You're my blood, my nephew. This fight? It's family business." Sam's mouth fell open in shock while Elias's face twisted with rage. Luke's hands trembled as he whispered, "You're lying." Crane's laughter filled the room as he revealed more. "Sheriff Briggs was never your ally. The boy's been whispering in his ear, feeding him lies about you." Luke turned toward Sam, his face a storm of betrayal. "Sam, tell me he's lying." Sam stammered, tears welling. "I didn't know. Briggs promised he'd keep us safe." Elias shoved himself upright, snarling, "The lawman's as dirty as Crane." Sam collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Luke's heart cracked as realization set in. "Crane played us all," Luke growled. Crane raised his revolver with a flourish. "And now the game ends." In that heartbeat, Luke lunged, tackling Crane as the gun went off, the shot echoing like thunder through the cramped space. The struggle left the room in ruins. Crane lay unconscious, his revolver skittering across the floor. Luke gasped for breath, blood streaking his knuckles. Elias leaned against a crate, pale but alive. "We need to go," Elias rasped. Sam crawled to Luke, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean to betray you." Luke placed a trembling hand on Sam's shoulder. "We'll make it right." The three of them staggered toward the exit as shouts rose outside. Lightning flashed through a broken window, illuminating their faces, haunted, determined, united. As they escaped into the storm, Luke cast one last glance at Crane's crumpled form. "This ends at dawn," he vowed, his voice swallowed by the howling wind. The storm raged through the night, lightning splitting the sky as Luke stood on a rickety platform in the center of the battered town square. Soaked to the bone, he faced the gathered townsfolk, their faces pale with fear and anger. Sam stood behind him, silent but resolute, while Elias leaned on a post, his wound hastily bandaged. Luke's voice cut through the storm. "Crane's lies end here. He's stolen our land, our lives, and turned us against each other." A murmur rose from the crowd. "We fight back not just for me, but for every soul he's crushed." Sam stepped forward, raising his revolver in trembling hands. "We stand together." Lightning flared, illuminating the crowd as determination replaced fear. Elias muttered, "Hope's a dangerous weapon." As the storm eased slightly, Elias staggered and nearly fell, clutching his side. Sam rushed to his aid, panic flashing in his eyes. "Stay with me, Elias," Sam pleaded. Elias gritted his teeth and growled, "You've got bigger battles to fight, boy." Sam shook his head fiercely, lifting Elias onto his shoulder, despite the older man's protests. "I won't leave you behind," Sam declared, his voice breaking with emotion. Luke glanced over his shoulder as he prepared his weapons. "Get him to safety, Sam. Then come back. I'll need you." Sam nodded, tears mixing with rain, determination hardening his features. Elias gave a faint, proud smile before they disappeared into the shadows towards safety, as the first gunshots rang out in the distance. Dawn broke with the roar of gunfire as Crane's men thundered into town on horseback, rifles blazing. Luke and the townsfolk fired from behind barricades of overturned wagons and barrels. "I need him." The smell of gunpowder choked the air as screams and shouts mingled with the pounding of hooves. Sam returned, sliding into position beside Luke, breathless but ready. "Elias is safe," he panted. Luke gave a sharp nod and fired, dropping a rider from his saddle. The battle raged, mud splattering under boots and horses' hooves. Crane's men advanced relentlessly, their dark coats flashing between bursts of smoke. A deputy fell beside Luke, his last breath cut short by the storm of violence engulfing the streets. Amidst the chaos, Luke spotted Crane striding into the center of the square, revolver spinning effortlessly in his hand. Their eyes locked across the carnage. Crane's voice boomed, cutting through the storm. "Face me, boy. End this like men." Luke stepped forward, the noise fading as if the world held its breath. "This ends today," Luke growled. They circled each other slowly, boots sinking into the mud. The townsfolk froze, watching. A single shot cracked the sky as lightning flashed, but it missed. Luke and Crane fired simultaneously, their movements sharp and precise. Crane staggered, clutching his side, rage twisting his features. Luke advanced, revolver steady, his breathing ragged but unbroken. As Crane staggered backward, a shout erupted from the crowd. Sheriff Briggs lunged forward, pistol drawn, aiming at Luke's back. Sam screamed, "Luke, look out!" Luke spun as Briggs fired, but a townsman tackled Briggs mid-shot. The bullet struck Crane instead, the impact spinning him into the mud. Crane collapsed, eyes wide with disbelief. The crowd surged, furious and vengeful. Briggs struggled to rise, but the people turned on him, disarming him with violent rage. Luke stood over Crane, breathing heavily, rain mixing with sweat. "Justice isn't yours to twist anymore," Luke said coldly. The storm broke at last, sunlight streaming through clouds as Crane took his final breath, the crowd cheering through tears and relief. The storm had passed, leaving the town drenched in golden dawn light. Luke knelt beside Isabella's lifeless body in the shadows of a burned stable, his fingers brushing the cold fabric of her shawl. His face was etched with grief, his chest tight with regret. Sam stood silently a few steps away, his head bowed in respect. Elias approached slowly, his limp pronounced but his eyes steady. "She bought us time," Elias said quietly, his voice heavy with sorrow. Luke closed his eyes and whispered, "She deserved better than this." The sound of distant hammering drifted through the square as townsfolk began to rebuild. Luke wrapped Isabella's shawl carefully and rose to his feet, his gaze hollow but resolute. "Her fight won't be forgotten," he vowed. Later Luke and Sam stood on a hill, overlooking the battered town. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys as townsfolk moved below, tending to ruins and comforting one another. Sam shifted uneasily, his youthful face hardened by recent trials. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Luke's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "The town will heal," he said, though doubt lingered beneath his calm tone. Sam's hand rested on the revolver at his side. "Maybe I could stay. Help them rebuild, keep watch." Luke finally turned to him, a faint smile breaking through his sorrow. "This place needs someone like you." Sam nodded, determination sparking in his eyes. For the first time hope felt possible. Inside the cave where their journey began, Elias sat near a crackling fire, wrapping fresh bandages around his side. Luke crouched beside him, quietly preparing supplies. Elias's voice was low but firm. "You did what I couldn't, you gave them a future." Luke's jaw tightened as he stared into the flames. "It cost too much." Elias placed a weathered hand on Luke's shoulder. "Cost is always high when you fight for something that matters." Sam entered, carrying a small pack of supplies for Elias. The three men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of battles fought and lives lost pressing in. Elias finally broke the stillness. "Rest, Luke. The wind may whisper, but it never forgets." As evening fell, Luke stood at the edge of town, watching as lanterns flickered to life in the windows. The townsfolk moved freely now, no longer shackled by Crane's fear. Elias sat on a nearby bench, his expression unreadable, while Sam spoke with a group of villagers, laughter breaking through the day's tension. Luke tightened the strap of his saddlebag, his revolver holstered at his hip. Elias called out, "You don't have to go." Luke glanced back, a faint weary smile touching his lips. "If I stay, my shadow will too." Elias nodded in silent understanding. Luke turned toward the open desert, the whispering wind carrying the promise of unknown roads ahead. Luke rode slowly out of town, the setting sun painting the desert in brilliant hues of crimson and gold. Behind him, the rebuilt town shrank to a small cluster of lights against the vast horizon. The wind picked up, tugging at his coat and carrying the faint echoes of past battles. As he crested a hill, a torn wanted poster of his face fluttered by, caught in a gust. Luke caught it midair, stared at it for a long moment, then released it to the wind. The paper spun away, vanishing into the endless sky. He whispered softly, "Free at last." Without looking back, Luke spurred his horse forward, disappearing into the dying light as the screen faded to black.